What happens when America's sweetheart meets her match in an unexpected showdown that nobody saw coming? Picture this. Kelly Clarkson, the beloved pop icon and talk show host, sitting across from Carson Daly on the Today Show. Sad, what should have been a routine interview about her latest album quickly spirals into television chaos. The cameras are rolling, millions are watching, and what unfolds next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about these two entertainment powerhouses. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will blow your mind. The morning itself began in a blur of routine professionalism. Makeup artists buzzed around with brushes and powder. Producers whispered into headsets, and assistants slid cue cards into place with quiet urgency. From the outside, everything looked like a well-oiled machine doing what it had done 1,000 times before. Kelly walked onto the set in a sleek outfit that screamed confidence, waving politely to crew members she had met countless times in her career. Carson stood nearby, reviewing notes while sipping from a coffee mug emblazoned with the show's logo, completely unaware of what the next few minutes would bring. When the cameras finally went live, the famous theme music faded out, and Carson slipped into his practiced smile. He welcomed viewers from across the country, his voice calm and familiar, and introduced Kelly with warm praise and enthusiasm. She smiled back, nodding politely, and for a brief moment everything appeared exactly as planned. The first questions were easy. They talked about her career, her fans, and how it felt to release new music after such a long journey in the industry. Kelly spoke eloquently, as she always did, using humor to keep the tone light and relatable. The audience laughed at her playful comments, and Carson relaxed, convinced this would be another flawless segment. But the mood shifted the instant he mentioned one specific song. His tone was still neutral, but the words lingered in the air longer than expected. Kelly's smile faltered, just slightly. The change was subtle enough that a casual viewer might miss it, but close observers could tell something had cracked beneath the surface. She answered cautiously at first, choosing her words with care. Her voice remained calm, but something in it had hardened. Carson, mistaking the restraint for hesitation rather than warning, continued probing, still polite, still smiling, but inching closer to the subject she clearly wanted to avoid. And that was when everything stopped feeling like an interview. Kelly shifted in her chair, took a breath, and did something no one expected. She pushed back. The audience leaned forward without realizing it. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, and across the country, living rooms grew suddenly quiet as viewers sensed the invisible line on live television had just been crossed. Kelly's response wasn't loud at first. It didn't have the drama of shouting or the sharpness of an outburst. Instead, it was contained, steady, and unmistakably serious. She pointed out how often her personal life had been dragged into interviews as if it were simply another marketing angle, another bullet point in a press release. The words landed heavier than anyone expected. Carson froze for half a second too long, his eyebrows lifting in visible surprise before he managed to speak again. He quickly apologized, saying the question hadn't been meant to offend, that he was simply asking what viewers were curious about. But the calm rhythm of the show was already gone, replaced by something tense and raw. Kelly didn't let it go. She spoke about how exhausting it was to walk into every studio knowing that her music would play second fiddle to her pain. How every interview, no matter how friendly it began, eventually tried to pull her back into the same emotionally bruised place. Her voice cracked only slightly, but it was enough to make the audience shift uncomfortably. Carson attempted to redirect the conversation. He suggested talking about her tour, her talk show, her achievements. He smiled again, the way seasoned hosts do when they try to guide a conversation away from danger. But Kelly refused the lifeline. Instead, she leaned forward and asked him if he understood what it felt like to have strangers feel entitled to her heartbreak, to treat her personal life like it existed purely for public consumption. The studio air grew thick with tension, as though everyone was holding their breath at once. Carson tried to regain control, explaining that he was there to serve the audience and that emotional context was part of storytelling. But the explanation only seemed to harden Kelly's expression. "So my divorce is a story now?" she asked. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Carson's posture stiffened. His voice grew firmer as he defended his position. insisting he was simply doing his job and that he hadn't meant any harm. The production team could be seen shifting in the background, some staring at monitors, others whispering urgently into their headsets. Kelly shook her head slowly. She told him that doing a job did not excuse ignoring someone's discomfort. That curiosity did not justify cruelty. And that just because she sang about her life did not mean she signed away every right to privacy. The audience remained silent. No applause, no laughter, just stillness. And then Carson, visibly flustered now, pushed back harder. He argued that once an artist shared their experiences publicly, they became fair ground for discussion. He insisted that an interview existed to explore truth, not avoid it. That was the moment Kelly's patience cracked entirely. She told him the difference between art and exploitation had been completely lost, and she made it painfully clear she believed he had crossed it. The conversation no longer resembled an interview. It had become something else entirely. Carson's voice sharpened as he defended himself, not just as a host, but as a professional with decades of experience. He spoke about his career, his reputation, and how insulting it was to be portrayed as someone who preyed on guests' emotions. His tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't gentle either. It was wounded pride wrapped in frustration. Kelly responded instantly. She accused him of valuing dramatic moments over human decency, of pushing until people broke because vulnerability made better television than comfort ever could. Every word landed with intention, as though she had carried them into the studio and finally released them all at once. The cameras kept rolling. A producer anxiously waved from the side, signaling to wrap it up. A floor manager tried to catch Carson's attention, but neither host seemed capable of pulling away. Carson stood. The movement startled the audience, drawing soft gasps from a few rows. He spoke louder now, saying no one forced her to sit there. No one forced her to write about her life. And no one forced her to answer any question. He declared that the blame being placed on him was unfair. Kelly stood as well. She reminded him that choice did not erase vulnerability, that honesty in art did not give anyone permission to weaponize it, and that being famous did not make her heart any less real. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her microphone. The small gesture grabbed everyone's attention more than shouting ever could. Carson continued talking, his words overlapping hers, frustration spilling out in sharp bursts. He accused her of twisting a harmless question into a personal attack. He told her she was overreacting, and that was when she removed the microphone completely. The sound of the clip detaching echoed strangely loud in the studio. "I'm done," she said. Her voice was calm now, but it was final. Carson stared at her, stunned. He tried one last time to frame the moment as unprofessional, as unnecessary, as something she would regret. But Kelly wasn't listening anymore. She set the microphone down on the chair. Not gently. The studio fell into chaos behind the scenes. But on camera, there was only stillness. Kelly stepped away from the chair, her face flushed but resolute. Carson remained frozen, standing in a place no script had prepared him for. For a few seconds, no one spoke. And in millions of homes across the country, viewers sat staring at their screens, shocked by what they had just witnessed. Kelly didn't look back as she walked toward the edge of the set. No dramatic exit music played. No commercial break arrived in time to protect the moment. The studio lights seemed harsher now, illuminating a reality that could not be edited away. A production assistant hurried after her, whispering urgently. But Kelly only shook her head and kept moving. Carson finally sat back down, running a hand over his face as if trying to wake from a bad dream. His ear filled with frantic instructions from producers, but he barely reacted. The polished host persona had vanished, replaced by something visibly shaken. The camera lingered longer than it should have, and that silence, it spoke louder than any argument. When the feed eventually cut to commercial, viewers were left stunned, scrolling through social media in disbelief. Within minutes, clips flooded the internet. Headlines began forming before the show even ended. Opinions exploded in all directions, some praising Kelly for standing her ground, others criticizing the confrontation as unnecessary and uncomfortable. Carson issued a brief statement later that day, insisting the conversation had been misunderstood and that he had always intended respect. Kelly, for her part, posted nothing at first. Then, hours later, she shared a simple message about boundaries, humanity, and the right to protect one's heart. No names were mentioned, no accusations spelled out, but everyone knew exactly what it meant. The nation debated for days after. Was Carson out of line, or just doing his job? Was Kelly brave, or did she let emotion derail professionalism? The answers depended entirely on who was watching and what they believed interviews were supposed to be. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just another viral clip. It was a moment that cracked open a larger conversation about fame, privacy, and the invisible cost of public life. It forced people to confront an uncomfortable truth that behind the songs, the smiles, and the staged moments, real pain often lives quietly until it no longer can. And on that morning, under studio lights too bright to hide anything, that pain finally spoke for itself. Not in music, not in lyrics, not in performance, but in silence, the kind that refuses to be ignored.